You've asked the question, who am I? And then you waited. You waited for something to shift, for the mind to go quiet in a particular way, for some sense of depth to open up, something that would feel unmistakably like the right direction, like you were finally close. And when nothing came, you asked again, quieter this time, more carefully. Maybe you relaxed the effort a little, because you've heard that trying too hard is the problem, so you tried less. And then you waited again. That movement, ask, wait, adjust, ask again, feels like practice. It feels like exactly what Ramana described. Turning attention inward, staying with the question, letting it settle. But there's something inside that movement that almost no one notices. Something so embedded in the way you do it that it doesn't feel like a mistake at all. It feels like sincerity. Ramana Maharshi said something about this question that most people hear and then immediately misunderstand. He said that "who am I" is meant to dissolve the one who is asking. The question exists to end the questioner. And the moment you really hear that, something becomes visible that was invisible before, because the entire time you've been practicing, there has been someone there, waiting to receive, waiting to finally understand, waiting to arrive. And that someone is precisely what the question was supposed to dissolve. This isn't a small distinction. It changes everything about what self-inquiry actually is. Most people approach the question the way you'd approach a locked door. You stand in front of it, you try different keys, and you wait to hear the click. The assumption is that something is closed, and the right effort will open it. So the question becomes a key, and you keep turning it carefully, attentively, certain that persistence will eventually produce the result. But Ramana said the self is already here, and he meant that as a precise description of what is actually the case, something that makes the entire architecture of seeking rest on a false ground. Notice what happens when you sit with the question right now. Even just as you listen, there may be a subtle shift in attention, a slight collecting of focus, something that turns inward and orients itself as if getting ready. That movement happens so fast, so automatically, that it precedes any decision to practice. And inside, it is a single quiet assumption that what you're looking for is somewhere ahead. It doesn't feel like an assumption. It feels like the most honest thing about the situation. Ramana pointed to something specific here. He said what needs to be removed is the thought, "I have not realized," because as long as that thought is present, there is someone who hasn't arrived, and the question, "who am I?" asked by that someone doesn't dissolve him. It gives him somewhere to go, which means the practice can continue for years, feeling completely sincere, completely aligned with the teaching, while something in it quietly keeps the seeker intact. And that's the part that's difficult to see, because it doesn't feel like an error. It feels like dedication. There is a question, and there is someone asking it, and that someone, without realizing it, is treating the question as a kind of tool, something that, used correctly, with enough sincerity, enough consistency, will eventually produce a shift, an opening, a recognition that finally sticks. The sincerity is real. But sincerity doesn't change the structure of what's happening. Underneath it, there is still someone trying to get somewhere, and that someone needs the journey to continue long enough to arrive. You can notice this in a very specific way. Right now, if you're willing to look. When you ask, "Who am I?" and nothing obvious happens, there's a small movement inside, almost imperceptible, that registers the absence of result. A subtle noting, "Not yet." And then the question rises again, or the attention adjusts, or there's a quiet checking of whether the effort is too much or too little, whether the posture is right, whether this particular moment of stillness is the kind that counts. All of that, the adjusting, the checking, the returning, feels like careful practice. It feels like what a serious practitioner does. But look at what it requires. It requires the continued existence of someone who is still on the way, someone who hasn't arrived, and that someone is the ego in one of its most refined forms, the humble seeker, the sincere practitioner, the one who has read the teachings carefully and knows better than to grasp at experiences. That version of the ego is much harder to see precisely because it looks like the path itself. And the mistake, the specific one this video is about, is not that you've been insincere. It's not that you've chosen the wrong technique or misunderstood the teaching intellectually. The mistake is this. Every time you've asked, "Who am I?" there has been someone on the other side of that question waiting to receive what it produces. Someone who will know, when the right thing happens, that it has finally happened. Someone who is still there at the end of the session, intact, perhaps a little clearer, but still there. That is the mistake. The questioner, surviving the question. You can recognize it not as a concept, but as something that happened this morning, or yesterday, or the last time you sat down to practice. The question arose. Something in you went quiet and turned inward, and underneath that quiet, almost invisible, was the assumption that the one doing the turning would eventually find what it was looking for. The inquiry was real. The attention was real, but the seeker was still present, watching, waiting, measuring the depth of the silence. Ramana said the thought, "I have not realized," is itself the ignorance, because the moment it arises, there is someone who hasn't realized, and that someone will now do something about it, will sit with the question again, will adjust the approach, will wait for something to shift. The structure of seeking remains completely intact. Only now it's wearing the clothes of inquiry. There's a particular quality to this that makes it so difficult to catch. The orientation of "I haven't arrived yet" feels like honesty. It feels like humility, like acknowledging the situation clearly, like refusing to pretend. That quality feels trustworthy. It feels like exactly the right way to approach something as serious as this. And yet, Ramana said something that cuts directly through it. He said that what is needed is simply to be, not to become this or achieve that, but to be, and that this alone is the end of ignorance, something that becomes apparent when the assumption of distance is no longer being sustained. Apparent to whom, though? That question doesn't arrive with an answer attached, and something worth noticing. the mind may already be moving to fill the silence around it, forming a response, reaching for a concept, finding the most spiritually correct way to complete the sentence. That movement is very quick and very familiar. It might be the same movement that's been running the inquiry all along. Even now, at the end of this video, there may be a quiet gathering happening, an attempt to take what was said and turn it into something usable, a way to practice differently, a more careful understanding to carry into the next session. The mind making sure it leaves with something it can work with. That movement is worth seeing because seeing it clearly is different from being carried by it without noticing. Ramana didn't leave a method behind. He pointed at something that is already the case and said that the only thing obscuring it is the sustained belief in its absence. That belief is quiet. It feels reasonable. It has been running beneath every sincere attempt to look inward, giving the looking a direction, keeping the looker intact. At some point during the listening today, there may have been a brief moment when the question arose, and the usual reaching didn't follow immediately. When something paused before moving to fill the space, that pause didn't produce anything. Nothing was gained in it, but it also wasn't waiting for anything to arrive. It's hard to say what that was. Maybe nothing worth naming. The breath is still here. The sounds in the room are still here. Whatever is aware of both of those things. It wasn't waiting for this video to end before being present. The inquiry continues in silence, or it continues in the next video on this channel. The same observation, a different angle, another teacher pointing at the same thing from a direction you may not have looked yet.